I am Laura Nix. I am a documentary director, and I'm here with Violet Feng to speak about her very beautiful documentary, Hidden Letters, which she directed and produced. And I'm so excited to speak with Violet because when I saw the film a few months ago, I was really moved by this story. And for a number of reasons, which I'll get into, but I mean, when I first started watching it, I, I was really fascinated to learn about something which I had never known before, which is about women in China who are encountering an ancient Chinese language, which was shared only between women. And then it goes on to inspire them to achieve agency in their own lives. And I was so impressed, Violet, by your really thoughtful, formal approach and using history as a way to speak about today. I was a history major, so I kind of geek out on that. And the way in which you used this really beautiful poetic imagery to compare these two moments in time, in the past and contemporary women's experiences in China now. And the story just unfolds so deliberately and precisely. And it's an incredible experience to watch it. And if you haven't seen it yet, I really hope you get to very, very soon. So thank you, Violet, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about the film today.
Thank you so much for watching it. And you know how much it meant to me of like your words of how you react to the film.
Well deserved. Let's just start with some really basic things.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can just tell us what is Nushu and when did it start and how was it used?
So Nushu is the world's only existing gender-based language right now, and it started hundreds of years ago. I mean, the earliest record is the end of Ming Dynasty and early Qing Dynasty, and it's a written language, and women created in a time when under feudal society that they had bound feet and locked in a chamber room and denied rights of education. So instead of having their voice silenced, they created this language that men didn't understand. And within this language, they also built a beautiful, beautiful underground sisterhood. And then using this language to write poems and songs to give each other hope and dignity. And also, with that and build a culture of the sisterhood, and it allowed them to speak among themselves and also to pass down their voice from generation to generation.
Like who knew, right? I mean, it's an incredible thing to discover that this existed. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about what we experience in the film, which is that we meet several women who have encountered Nushu and are using their encounter with this ancient language to be able to navigate the issues that they're experiencing in their own lives. So can you speak a little bit about who we meet and what issues they're dealing with today?
Yeah, so the two women that I casted, one is from rural area, whose name is Hu Xing, and one is from metropolitan city Shanghai, whose name is Zimu. They're both millennial generation women in China because I felt like they're the one who is taking the most risk as the younger generation to trying to figure out their identity as young women in China today. And I know that I wanted to kind of like observe the challenges, the different kind of challenges that they face, both for women in the rural and in urban settings, because the challenges that they face are quite different. And so it's about what they're facing in their personal life and in their career, and also how they deal with themselves, how they deal with the systematic kind of like gender perceptions from the outside, and how do they deal with the reaction from men to project on them of who they are. So all of these things, then I think it's both external and internal is what I'm trying to capture, the challenges that they're facing, especially today.
I was wondering like what inspired you in your own life to make this film? Like what experiences have you had that led you to become so interested in Nushu and why you decided that it would be really important to share with contemporary audiences?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Shanghai, so it was during a time that more or less it's more communist time, and my mom is the first generation medical staff that benefited from the communist time, which really pushed on gender equality, and I was more raised by my dad, who's a musician, so who's not bound to like go to work full time. He's a professor, and so he always pushed me to dream as high as I could. So I felt like, at the time that there's no gender income gap when I was growing up, I never really felt a sense of being trapped as a girl, of what I can dream. And then, like, I went on to go to the US for education, which, my parents took great pride of. But it was not until 2010 that I moved back to China with my husband and we got married and have a child. And all of a sudden, I started to, like, feel the amount of pressure for me as a woman that I've never felt before. And I wonder, how does that even, become this way, because it's not how I grew up with, and it felt like a 180-degree turn. And I was started to kind of reflect on it, and then a lot of it I felt like is what capitalism plays a role on, how it has affected gender equality in China, and also on coupled with all the other elements that kind of put pressure on women, including reproductive and politics, and also economic pressures on all of that. So it made me feel trapped in a way that I've never felt before. And I realize it's not just me, it's all of the women that around me are feeling the same. And we don't have an agency to talk about it because gender inequality on book, it doesn't exist in China. So and it's not a time that I felt that there's a place for us to discuss this openly. That's why, like, I really wanted to use a tool, a vehicle, which in this case is Nushu, to help me to also digest what's happening with me and also with all the women around me. And yeah, that's how I think is very much of how I feel inspired to make this film.
I was really moved by the women's stories in the film because I felt I really related to what they were dealing with in their own lives, which is, what your expectations of marriage and motherhood might be as a woman in contemporary society, and how those expectations from men can sometimes be just like wildly not
Right.
compatible with our own dreams and hopes of what we want to be able to achieve. Um, I speak this as a woman who does not have children and is unmarried. I should just say that, but um, that they are they're really able to articulate to themselves and to their friends what it is that they want. And it's when they start speaking to who the husband will be, it's like there's this gap that's just like it's very large. It's not minor. It's very the expectations are wildly out of sync. And also what happens in really subtle ways in the workplace in which women's contributions can still be demeaned and still be not recognized, and um, the very narrow window in which we're allowed to communicate, and how any type of assertiveness can be misconstrued as being like aggressive or out of sync, whereas with men it would just be completely fine. All this stuff still exists, okay, everywhere, I think, in every culture. And it's really interesting to think about how language is at the root of that, and how so much of this power structure comes from the written word. uh, so I thank you for kind of making the film to be able to reveal that, because it's a really interesting comparison to that. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how women's lack of education and reading and writing has been used as a kind of tool of oppression throughout history, and in China specifically.
So I think, first of all, what I came to realize after making this film more and more so is that every personal experience of women, of the challenges that we're dealing in the daily life, is political. I mean, just like period, it is political. And I didn't feel that as much before because I felt like what I'm dealing with, the issues are too trivial as a woman, like it's like a mother or wife, so what? Everybody deal with that. But it's political. And the more I think about it, is like why I think it's trivial is because, all these things is ingrained in me and making me feel like what I'm dealing with is not significant enough to speak up. And that's actually, I think it's so important in Yushu, that how they found this vehicle, because, like in China for thousands of years, education is only accessible to the very few elite class of women.
Mm-hmm.
And all the others, they're just not able to access school or any kind of education. As a result, as we said in the beginning of the film, that there's no record of literature from female in our Chinese history. So there's no voice being heard of their experiences, of their, thoughts and everything. It's very much like silenced in a way. And it's really, really tragic in a way. But here in Yushu, every woman there has a biography book, there is a biography to document how wonderful they are as a person. And these biography books are written by their swan sisters, as wedding gifts. So the more biography books you receive as a bride, the more you will be also treated and respected by your husband's village, the new hometown that you're going to marry off to, because all the women there, it's like it's a ritual that they're going to read the biographies that's written by your swan sisters. So it's a very thought out structure, not just about the language itself, but how to use this language to elevate these women. And that's like brilliant to me. And it was so much wisdom that embedded in it, and so well thought out. And because of that, also because of the structure, I think that eventually that even men kind of showed more respect to these women who practice this language, because there's English word, say gentleman, right? Those women who are able to practice this language are regarded and called as gentlewomen in these villages, and these like secluded, really like remote and on the bottom of the society kind of village, like they're all poor people. And the other thing that I found so fascinating is, the last living master in the film was talking about how Nushu was made accessible to all women despite of their socioeconomic backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about whether you're from a wealthy family or a poor family. Everyone had access to learn about it as long as you're willing to learn, and they could learn it about it from very young age by grouping together all these girls, and then they will learn it together. So it's just like it's a really well thought out kind of structure, and structurally they're using this to kind of negotiate with the existing power by writing.
That notion of these biography books is so amazing, because it's leading from this kind of pedagogy of, like learning this language and being able to communicate it, but with other women, right? Like it's not a universal language per se, because it's not being shared with men, but then to have that pedagogy basically translate into understanding how to speak about another woman's biography, and the ability to tell a story about another woman's life.
Exactly.
Right? That there's like the power of that is amazing. And you think about like, wow, we could really benefit from that right now anywhere. I mean, forget the bachelorette party. Everyone should be sitting around writing the biography of the bride, right? Like that's such a better idea. That's such a better way to spend your time to celebrate your friend who's about to get married.
Absolutely. And I mean, to me, that's why I subtly planted the seeds of the essence of what Yushu means in the film as the three legacies, intertwined with the stories from these two women as they're going through their lives. So it's about sharing vulnerability, sharing, the sufferings and the challenges that we're dealing with. And it is about building a sisterhood. And it is about claiming our resilience and claiming our power and then our pride from within. So these are like sort of like chapter headings, which I chose like 3 poems that directly speaking about that in the film, as as how that's being connected to the stories of the main characters as their life goes on. So I mean, that's how I felt about the most powerful kind of like three things from Nushu.
It's amazing. I think one of the reasons I love the film so much is because I made this film with Julia Meltzer called The Light in Her Eyes, which is about a women's Quran school in Damascus, Syria, that we made before the war. And, to the at first it might seem like having all these young girls and women memorize the Quran, like, is that a positive thing? Is this a negative thing? And um, we discovered that it was incredibly empowering to the women in the community, because the Quran serves as a language of authority within the culture. And therefore, knowing that language and memorizing the Quran gave women agency to be able to say, like, look, the Quran says that it's my duty as a Muslim to read. It's my duty as a Muslim to be educated. It's, if I am here to support my family by working, that is part of my duty to be able to support my family.
Right.
And so the sheikha, which was teaching the women, was using that as a tool within the community to educate the women and the men in the community that women should be able to leave the house to work, women should be going to school, women should be gathering together and creating kinship and learning about the Quran in groups within the mosque, right? Forming their own community instead of like thinking that they have to be left at home and studying on their own. And that's just another example of the way in which the written word and language, I think, and having skill in that and empowered to have that skill just gives you so much power in the world. And it you start the film right with these images of deformed feet, when women's feet were bound, and showing how there was a very deliberate decision to limit women's movements, right? Like, you have to stay at home, and if you're going to go outside and walk, you really can't walk. And I thought that was a really interesting way to introduce this idea about movement and the ability to move, to have agency to move freely. Can you speak a little bit about how the language also serves as another vehicle for movement, as another way to help women move in the world?
Well, literally, the language really helped these women because of their limitation to move once, especially after they married off to their husband's village, which is usually, like without transportation, for it will take them sometimes, over a day to get to. So because the existence of this language, they were able to keep ties with their Swan sisters and then to still express themselves in a beautiful way. And in that sense, and also because of this sisterhood, and then the recognition of that, your Swan sister is allowed to visit you, but no one else, to your husband's family. So that literally really allows movement among these women, both physically and also in writing. So, I mean, that's why, like, very much that they have these sisterhood all the way till they die, and then like all the writings that the sisters written to them or they wrote themselves will be burnt with them in Chinese. That means that it will be with them eternally. It's a very beautiful kind of way for these women to maintain their relationship, yeah, over their lifetime.
What do you hope that audiences take away from the film when they're
Yeah, I
not
I
really?
I know that, sometimes when I'm watching these women's stories as it unfold, and I know that some of the challenges that they have faced, that I may not deal with the same kind of issues. And I was thinking that sometimes for Western audience and to look at this film and then the challenges that these women are facing, they'll be like, okay, these challenges that what these women are dealing with, and then like we're dealing with our own things, which is might be ahead of them in a way that but like what I was trying to say is that whatever things that we're dealing with, first of all, it's political, and secondly, it's a way for us to reflect on ourselves of how much we should unroot ourselves
Mm.
in this narrative
Mm.
of how the patriarchal society has projected on us, how much we should push, how much we should unroot our own perceptions on this. And I'm still like grappling with it, how much on a daily basis that I should fight with my husband of this is your duty, this is my duty. And how much I should, like set my daughter free of this is about women, but this is actually not about, your definition of being a girl. So like, I think this is an interesting time for us to really think about that. And then, like it takes a complete restructure of like, how do we see each other in order to help us to bridge this understanding of where the gender gap is, right? So yeah, I think that's what I really hope people, and then not just women, for men too, to help us to kind of like think, in what way are we trapped in this, and how do we get out of this, and how do we meet each other?
Well, that's what the film does so beautifully, is that it shows us that through the bonds of sisterhood, like how we're able to make progress together. And, that's another thing that can happen with capitalism, is that it can become very individualized and like, woman's solo journey. And you're reminding us that, in fact, it has to do with the bonds that we form collectively to be able to make progress.
Absolutely.
And I just think that comes across so beautifully. Thank you so much for talking today. And thank you so much for this absolutely beautiful film. I hope everybody gets a chance to see it.
Thank you so much, Laura, for speaking to me.